Want to know what the first step of creativity is? It isn't what you think. Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Nathan Smith. Welcome to the Blueprint Sounds video blog. I'm so glad you're joining me. Before we get started, if you haven't had a chance, go to my website, blueprintsounds.com, and sign up for my newsletter. That way you'll be the first to know when blogs are available or new products, which are coming very soon. With that being said, let's talk about creativity and where to start with creativity. Actually, we're going to start with a book that I've read recently that is absolutely fantastic. Ryan Holiday wrote a book called Perennial Seller. And if you are in any sort of creative endeavor, whether it is writing a book or an album, anything that you're going from start to finish, from the creative process to marketing and releasing, this is a fantastic book. I can't recommend it highly enough. I'll probably do a review on it later. But there is one thing that I disagree with. Ryan Holiday, in his book, says creativity is not a divine act. It is not a lightning strike. And he's wrong. His larger point is that as creatives, we should not be just waiting around, staring, looking out the window, waiting for some fully formed, beautiful idea to just drop on us, because that's not how creativity works. And he's absolutely true. Creativity is all about iteration and problem solving and trying something out, seeing what works and what didn't, and then reviewing it and reworking it. All that is absolutely true. But when he says that creativity is not a divine act, he misses something. And to talk about that and explain what that means, we have to talk about how we start our day, or technically, when we start our day. Let's begin in Genesis. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Genesis 1, 3 through 5. In the Western world, we tend to think that we start our that we start our day in the morning with coffee. But the Bible is explicit in the first chapter of the whole thing that the day begins at night and ends at night. The Jews begin their Sabbath day at night, at dusk, till the next dusk. So what does that have to do with anything? The night is not primarily about resting from the labor that we did the day before. The night is about receiving from the Lord what we need for the next day's labor. Don't worry, I can prove it. So, when the Israelites are wandering in the desert because of their disobedience, God is still providing for them. So let's go to Exodus. That evening, quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. And that, of course, is manna, which they had never seen before. God gave the Israelites the manna that they would need for the next day at night. They couldn't even save the manna that they had collected that day for the next morning because it would rot by then, right? So for 40 years, the Israelites are on this diet of receiving at night what they're going to need for the next day. And so God had to build that in them till they got to the point where they said, yes, we receive from the Lord at night what we're going to need. We don't receive from men, we receive from the Lord. And that perfectly lines up with Scripture in James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights. So, creativity, like any other human endeavor, begins with receiving from the Lord. This may seem trivial, but it's not, and the consequences of not receiving from God are dire. So let's take a look at the parable of the talents. In the parable of the talents, the master calls 3 servants together because he's going on a journey, and so he gives them some of his property. And to one he gives 5 talents, to one he gives 2 talents, to one he gives 1 talent, and then he goes away for a long time. Much later he comes back and wants to settle accounts with his servant, and so we'll pick it up there. This is in Matthew, by the way. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more." "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Matthew 25:19-21. The servant who received 2 talents did the exact same thing. He doubled his money, gave it back to the master, and received the exact same congratulation. But the guy who got 1 talent says, Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, You wicked and lazy servant. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. Ouch. In our modern sense of justice, we would probably point the finger at the master and say, why didn't you give everybody the same amount of talents? That's not equitable. But the master wasn't concerned with that, because it wasn't about the number of talents. He even says to both of the servants, you have been faithful with a few things. So he acknowledged that he had given them a few things to see what they would do with them. He judged the servants on 2 criteria: gratitude and faithfulness. So let's talk about those 2. Gratitude allows us to receive from God correctly. When we realize that we receive from the Lord everything, we are able to do what the servants did. And what did they do? They utilized their gifts, they took initiative, and they built. That is what faithfulness is. So the other half of the receiving equation is the giving equation. You always find these 2 in Scripture: receiving, giving, receiving, giving. And thankfulness allows us to receive with joy, use the resources that God has already given us, and make use of those gifts to give it back to Him. Receiving, giving. The wicked and lazy servant couldn't even get past step 1. He received, but because of his beef with the master, he couldn't actually accept it. He just went out and buried it. He had no gratitude, and therefore he had no faithfulness, and therefore he had nothing to show the master when he came back from his journey. When we don't acknowledge what God has already given us, we shut down the process of receiving and giving and receiving and giving. And that's the cycle that God has instituted in nature and everywhere else. He wants that to happen for us. But if we're not thankful, if we don't have gratitude, we shut it down. And therefore we shut out blessing. Without gratitude, our hearts get clogged with things like self-pity, envy, contempt, anger, unforgiveness, and entitlement. And not only does it stagnate us, not only does it stop the process, it actually moves us backwards. It may seem harsh that the master would take the talent away from the guy who buried his stuff, but it's really not. Because remember, this servant could have had the same congratulation as the other 2 if only he had made use of it. But because he had no thankfulness, because he had no faithfulness, he lost even what he had. That's how much God values gratitude. He demands that we be thankful because that's what makes the whole cycle go. It's for us. That gratitude and thankfulness, which leads to faithfulness, is for us. God doesn't need it. He needs us to need it because we need to be like Him. It's often been said that Satan can't create anything, which is true. Satan can only corrupt. Everything that he does is either backwards or upside down or inverted or inside out. It's all a corruption of God's beautiful design. The reason why is that Satan can't receive. He is so prideful that he cannot accept anything from God. He wants God's throne. He doesn't want to receive from God. And so he can't create. If we want to be creative, we have to. We have no other choice than to receive from the Lord with thankfulness what we've already been given and make use of those resources. So, don't be like Satan. And that's my speech. I'll see you guys on the next episode.